This third panel is titled Building a More Inclusive and We First Society. This panel will explore the pathways to building a stronger and more inclusive Singapore identity. Panelists will discuss how Singapore can adopt a more we first mindset, where there is a shared vision driving collective action while also celebrating our individuality and differences. The moderator of this panel is Dr. Laurel Teo, Senior Research Fellow and Head of Society and Culture at the Institute of Policy Studies. She will open the panel discussion and introduce these speakers. Laurel, over to you.
Thank you. Welcome back to the conference, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. It's always tough to be the first act after lunch. So while you're all taking time to settle into conference mode, let me take the opportunity to introduce you to the themes we'll be discussing for the next 90 minutes and then also the speakers as well. So earlier this morning, we heard from the first panel about the impact of digital disruptions on social cohesion. And then the second panel spoke about how Singapore can bridge differences across diverse groups in our community. So for now, our third panel will focus on what are the considerations in encouraging inclusiveness and building a we-first society. Now, Prime Minister Lawrence Wong and President Tharman Shanmugaratnam have both spoken about this topic. They said it was important for Singaporeans to think beyond ourselves, the self, and broaden our attention and efforts to think about collective goals and effort to take a collective action for the collective good. To build a we-first society. But what does it mean to be a we-first society? And what do we mean by that? And what are the factors that can foster a we-first society? And conversely, what are the challenges and obstacles that could impede this? We will hear from our panelists about this. We're very fortunate to have three very eminent speakers joining us on this panel. We couldn't have asked for more qualified experts on this very topic, actually. So I will just do a quick round of introduction because there isn't enough time to do justice to their full list of accomplishments. But please, I would urge you to read through their bios more carefully in the conference kit. So to my immediate right, we have Associate Professor Vincent Chua from the NUS Department of Sociology and Anthropology. Prof. Vincent is a leading scholar studying social capital. He has published many papers and books in this area. I'll just name one. He has written Social Capital in Singapore, The Power of Network Diversity. And next to Vincent, we have Mr. Tony So, Chief Executive Officer at the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Centre, NVPC. As CEO of NVPC, Mr. So leads NVPC's efforts to nurture the heart of Singapore, help build a more caring, inclusive and compassionate society. And Mr. So himself has held leadership and senior management roles, not only in government and social sectors, but also in the corporate world with regional and global responsibilities. And then finally, we're very honored to have Mr. David Neo, Acting Minister for Culture, Community and Youth, and also Senior Minister of State for Education. At MCCY, Minister David chairs the National Integration Council, the Singapore Cares Steering Committee, among many others. And at the parliamentary debate on the President's address back last year, in September, Minister David actually spoke about building a We First culture, and in particular about MCCY's efforts and plans to give Singapore youth a voice, platform, and the space to make a difference to help them put we before me. So without further ado, please welcome our very first speaker for this session, Associate Professor Vincent Chua. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I thank IPS for inviting me to speak, but I also apologize to them for having and giving them a deck of 40 slides. But not to worry, it's mostly pictures. Robert Putnam visited Singapore in 2011, and whilst here, he gave a number of talks and lectures, met many people. His key message: social networks have value, social capital is good for individuals, social capital is good for society. In fact, I have the news clipping here from 15 years ago.
Wow.
It says, Singapore cannot afford to stop building social capital. and this is from 15 years ago when he came in 2011. Now, he wrote the famous book, Bowling Alone, and he tells us that the line is going down. Organizational involvement is going down over time. You see the x-axis represents time. Club meeting attendance is also going down. Church attendance is also going down. People are bowling alone, both men and women. There is also a decline in informal socializing. And trust levels are also going down, especially amongst the young. So everything is going down. But thankfully, in 2020, he writes another book entitled The Upswing. Social cohesion in America is still down, but he looks back into history and says we used to do much better, especially before 1960, and therefore, if we did it before, we can do it again. How America came together a century ago, and how we can do it again. Now, I'm very inspired by Putnam, and I want to see if we can apply his work to Singapore. I want to study social capital in the context of larger social forces, taking into account changes in politics, economy, and culture over time. I think this morning we spent a lot of time talking about the human level and what individuals as well as organizations can do to improve social cohesion. But as a sociologist, I want to focus my attention today on the social structure and on the macro level, and how the macro level factors affects social capital. So I will argue that rather than taking a snapshot, we should study social capital by contextualizing it, tracing it, as well as enhancing it. And for that, I have data. I've analyzed data on Singaporeans and their attitudes over time. Very grateful for the 21,000 cases that I have, over 9 waves spanning a range of 23 years. So I have social network data for 2001, 02, 03, 6, 9, 13, 16, 19, and 23, as well as a subset of panel data between 2019 and 2023, where I'm able to follow the respondents over time, the same person over a space of a few years. Now, what I'm going to do is to study the patterns of social capital over 3 periods between 2001 and 2023, and I segment the analysis into 3 periods: 01, 2, 3, 6, and 9, which I call the growth first years. Some people will call it growth at all costs. Period 2 will be 13 and 16, growth reconsidered. This comes in the aftermath of GE 2011. And period 3, 2019 and 2023, which we call the inclusive growth years. So growth at all costs, period 1, growth considered, period 2, and period 3, we have inclusive growth. Now, let me very quickly bring us through. I don't think I will take long on this. But period 1 is growth at all costs. We had large inflow of immigrants, rising cost of living, inflation, asset prices, rising income inequality, the Gini coefficient went up, globalization was on the rise. In essence, we had a situation of rapid growth as well as rising competition. In period 2, I call it growth reconsidered. This was after GE 2011, where immigration was tightened, inflation fell, there was aggressive redistribution, the Gini coefficient falls, there were national conversations, the passing of Mr. Lee provided national reflection and unity. In 2015, we celebrated the Jubilee year, and Olympic gold provided a moment of collective celebration. So in essence, growth continues, and I would argue that under this era, cohesion was strengthened. Now, going on to period 3, which is the period of inclusive growth, Growth remains essential amid global uncertainty. We had a controlled pace of immigration to support the economy. Inequality continues to decline. COVID-19 reinforces national solidarity but also reveals stresses. We had trade wars and external shocks. Broader definitions of success emerged. Topics of well-being and mental health became national topics, and in essence, we are trying to balance growth with social cohesion, with equity in a more complex environment. Now, I'm not saying all these just anecdotally. In fact, I have the evidence. This is immigration. In period 1, you can see that immigration rises. In period 2, immigration falls. And in period 3, immigration rises again. Right? So immigration goes up in the first period, it comes down, and in the third period, it goes up again. When it comes to inflation, we see the pattern. In period 1, inflation is up. In period 2, inflation comes down. And in period 3, inflation comes up again. Inequality, the Gini coefficient. In period 1, inequality goes up. In period 2, it comes down. And in period 3, it continues to fall. So the 3 I's, immigration, inflation, and inequality. And I'm going to argue in my speech today that it is the 3 I's, inflation, inequality, and immigration, that combines to affect social cohesion. This is the summary. So the 3 I's, immigration, inflation, and inequality, in the first period, all the 3 are up. In the second period, all the 3 are down. And in the third period, immigration and inflation are high, and inequality is low. Now, the linchpin to all of this is competition. Immigration often translates into competition for jobs, for housing, and for space, resulting in social friction. Inflation, some people can withstand it, some cannot. Resentment builds up within the system. People say, why are prices so high? And people struggle and compete to stay afloat. Inequality, the research is clear. Economic polarization often produces social polarization as people are living in separate worlds and in separate social bubbles. What is the result? The result is the loss in social cohesion. So it's like a pendulum. In period 1, you're swinging to competition. In period 2, you've swung to community. And in period 3, it comes down the middle. My hypothesis is that when competition is high, social cohesion comes down. Competition and economic stress makes individuals out of people, and getting ahead supplants getting along. And I supplants we. Are you ready for the results? This is the pattern. National identity, which is on the y-axis, was the lowest in 2011. So under the growth first years, you see social capital coming down. And then in the aftermath of 2011, with a lot of redistribution policies, national conversations, and so on, Jubilee year, passing of Mr. Lee, social cohesion goes up. And then in the third period after that, social cohesion, national identity comes down. So the pattern is down, up, down. Okay, so the argument that I'm making today is that levels of social cohesion are responsive to changes in political economy. And that's the sociological viewpoint, because it is the changes at the level of social structure that bring about changes in the social interactions that we have. Now, there's a lot of data here, but I'm just going to be very brief about it. These are correlations. When inequality goes up, national identity comes down. You can see in Model 1, minus 29. Okay? So the higher the Gini coefficient, the lower the national identity. When productivity goes up, national identity comes down. People are working too hard. When the economy is strong, national identity goes up, standards of living are high, people are cheered. Now, immigration and inflation go together. They are quite highly correlated. All right, so that's the first thing. The second thing is this. Immigration increases national identity only if you can remove the inflation that comes with it. Okay, because immigration and inflation come together. Okay, and in fact, the inflation that comes with immigration suppresses and pulls down the national identity. When inflation goes up, national identity comes down. No matter what I do, the pattern remains the same. Down, up, down. I am proud to be Singaporean, down. It hits bottom at 2011, up, down. I use strongly agree, because if I had used agree and strongly agree, we have no variation. National levels of identity are high. Right, so it's all 90-something, it doesn't, you don't see the variation there, so I looked at strongly agree. Okay, so it goes down, up, down. I feel a sense of belonging to Singapore, down, up, down. I think of Singapore as my home, down, up, down. I'm willing to let my children play with children of other races, down, up, down. I have close friends who are not of my own race, down, up, down. Need I say more? Any Singaporean with ability and talent has a good chance of becoming successful, down, up, down. Singapore is a land of opportunity for Singaporeans who work hard, down, up, down. And in fact, the general pattern is down. Now, what is very clear from the analysis is that social mixing is positively correlated with national identity. The more social mixing there is across races, the higher the national identity levels are. But even that is subjected to down, down, up, down. Okay? So if you look at this graph here, the y-axis refers to the positive effect of social mixing on national identity. The positive effects of social mixing on national identity are attenuated under competition. You see that the effect is still positive, but the line comes down under the first era, and then it goes up in the second era, and it goes down again in the third era. So competition, in fact, attenuates the positive effect of social mixing on national identity. So levels of social mixing across race go down under competition, levels of national identity go down under competition, and the positive effects of social mixing on national identity also go down under competition. So what am I saying? I'm saying that competition is in the air, and it dilutes community. Now, the undulating pattern suggests that social cohesion is tied to changes in political economy. On the local level, ground efforts are critical, and they reveal the good heart of Singaporeans. And here, I means we, in people giving back to society. I think Tony will talk about this. But equally important is the level of social structure. If you look at it from the top, the bird's eye view, you will see a social pattern that is more than the sum of parts, where the market logic competes with the communitarian logic. To cite the economic historian Karl Polanyi, when growth outpaces community, a market economy becomes a market society. Relationships are transactional, and my study suggests a trade-off. The laws of scarcity are such that you cannot have 100% of both. Yet, the question of allocation is not something science can answer. It is ultimately a moral question based on two considerations. First, national circumstance, and second, what people want as a society. How much work are we willing to give up for higher TFR? That's the Mary Brinton question. How much speed are we willing to give up for better road safety for all? How much academic competition are we willing to give up for more holistic childhoods? The call for work-life balance is often read as entitlement, and perhaps it is so. But at the structural level, the call for work-life balance could actually signal an imbalance between competition and community. Work-life balance is not just a personal problem, it is a structural issue, the result of which is burnout and mental health challenges and populations that are less healthy. To be clear, I'm not against competition. We are, after all, a little red dot. But what we need is balance. Now, let me end my sharing. What can we do to increase social cohesion? I've talked about immigration and inflation. Let me focus on inequality. To bring people together, we need to reduce 3 kinds of inequality, what I call the 3 Rs. First, resource inequality. Income inequality is coming down, that's good, but wealth inequality is something else. Second, relational inequality. For this, we have social mixing in public housing, in schools, and in workplaces. But the challenge is public versus private housing. They are not mixing. Third, we have recognition inequality. In my view, this is the hardest of the 3. It is the last of the giants. Now, 60 years of meritocracy has taught us to see ourselves and others in a certain way through the lenses of achievement. We conflate resource with respect. We see people in terms of the 5 Cs. And once we see, we cannot unsee. We tie perceptions of human worth to indicators of success and achievement. And how we see others determines how we treat them and how we relate to them. The way we see determines how we relate to each other and subsequently social cohesion. The challenge then is how to decouple perceptions of worth from material success, which is why the proposal to redefine success and to broaden definitions of success is, in my view, the hardest thing ever. I mean, how do you change a culture? The self is always mediated by status, crowding out the true person. David Brooks has himself written a book about this, The Art of Seeing Others. In conclusion, economic success is important, but social success is also important. May we be both at the same time, in the proportions we have agreed as a society. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent, for the very interesting and insightful analysis over time, especially the observation on the tension between getting ahead and getting along. Now let us welcome Mr. Tony So, CEO of National Volunteer and Philanthropy Centre, who will share with us how NVPC has been making it more accessible and creating more opportunities for Singaporeans from all walks of life to volunteer and give back, and to share with us the progress of this important work. Tony, please. Yeah.
Good afternoon. I want to first thank Director Janadas Devan and the IPS team for this opportunity to be part of the Singapore Perspectives Conference. And I sense that the reason why I'm here is really the work that we do has to do with the theme of fraternity. And fraternity is a sense of friendship, but also that notion of mutual support. That people are not just friends in fair times, but also in situations where there's a need for people to step forward. True friendship counts when there's mutual support. At NVPC, the work is about giving. And here we believe in a simple but powerful idea that everyone can give. And when we develop a culture where everyone gives, everywhere and every day, we contribute to building a more inclusive and we-first society. NVPC's purpose is to nurture the heart of Singapore. When we talk about the heart of Singapore, we speak of the core and essence of who we are as a people. It is a spirit that had moves us to look beyond ourselves, to care for the people around us, and to stand together through good times and challenging moments. This spirit has carried us through 6 decades of nation building, and it is critical to keep this spirit strong even as we look ahead to the future. And that is why we need to work together to strengthen and nurture the spirit of Singapore, the heart of Singapore. At MVPC, we believe that one of the most powerful ways to become a we-first society is through giving. And this is because giving changes how we relate to one another. Indeed, as Prof. Chua says, how we see each other. So when we give, we stop seeing the other person as a stranger, and we start seeing them as part of our community. They become us. But herein lies the challenge. When it comes to giving, volunteerism, and philanthropy, sometimes there's still a perception that is something distant or exclusive or for someone else to do. This form of philanthropy and giving, perhaps because it's what you see in the newspapers, in the media, that is about wealthy people donating large sums of money. And there's nothing wrong with that. It is important, and it has contributed to Singapore's nation building. Yet, is that the only way to think about philanthropy and giving? If we take a step back, philanthropy comes from the Greek words philos, meaning to love, and anthropos, meaning humankind. So the word literally means the love of humanity. So from its original meaning and its Greek roots, philanthropy is about loving and caring for others. It is certainly not limited only to certain people, and it's not about giving money. In fact, it is something that everyone can do. Everyone can love and care for others. So it is time, we think, to broaden how we think about giving. At MVPC, we believe that everyone can give everywhere and every day. And this becomes possible when we redefine what and how we give. When it comes to what we can give, we talk about the 5 T's. And you see that in the circle: time, talent, treasure, ties, and testimony. Beyond treasure or giving money, and time and talent referring to service and skilled volunteering, there are 2 additional dimensions of giving which can multiply our impact. Ties refer to the power of networks to bring others into the act of giving by tapping connections with our loved ones, friends, and colleagues. We can help them get started on their giving journey. Testimony is about raising awareness about causes and inspiring others by sharing our own experiences, and even through social media. So when we recognize that giving takes different shapes and forms, it becomes more accessible and less intimidating. And indeed, this is how everyone can give everywhere and every day. At MVPC, we conduct research to understand the different dimensions, drivers, and expressions of giving. From our drivers and outcomes of a volunteering journey, longitudinal study 2025, we found that people start and sustain giving for very different reasons. The 4 broad motivations are values and altruism, wanting to stay active or find meaningful ways to spend time, achieving professional goals, and seeking self-discovery and growth. Among our respondents, there was a 19-year-old student who told us this, and I quote, "I am passionate about helping those in need, especially those from low-income families. Because for me, I don't come from a very wealthy background, so I've actually experienced what they're going through. I resonate with what they are feeling. So I feel like I want to give back to society to help them now that I'm in a better position," unquote. And another respondent, a 24-year-old young lady who shared, and I quote, "I just want to be a better person overall. I just want to be more confident, understand other people better, and have a change in my mindset as well. I just wanted a breakthrough. That's why I volunteered," unquote. What these examples highlight is this reality. a person's life stage and personal circumstances shape what, how, and when we give. If people are motivated differently, we need diverse pathways to enable them to participate. If we want generosity to be inclusive and pervasive, we must make giving accessible, meaningful, and relevant. This brings me to MVPC's role as an enabler and connector of the giving ecosystem. We're not in a position to tell people what they should care about. What we can do is to make it easier for people to discover what matters to them and to take action, and hopefully to continue taking action over time. In practice, we strengthen Singapore's giving ecosystem through 4 focus areas: enabling everyone to give, activating businesses for good, strengthening nonprofits, and nurturing the next generation of givers. First, we enable everyone to give by making giving simple, secure, and accessible through digital technology. Our national giving platform, Giving.sg, directly connects more than 700 registered charities with members of the public who wish to contribute in some way. Over the years, Giving.sg has grown steadily, making it the leading digital giving platform in Singapore. And I'm pleased to share with this audience this afternoon, and this is hot off the presses, that donations on Giving.sg reached almost 105 million between January and December 2025, a growth of 21% compared to the same period last year. Yes. Please clap, because I am very sure many of the donors who helped us achieve this number is in this room. So thank you very much. This makes 2025 the year Giving.sg achieved the highest donations in its history. And this record-breaking performance shows that the spirit of generosity among the people of Singapore remains strong. What a wonderful way to celebrate SG60. To complement our digital platform, we also organize large-scale activations. Great Singapore Give is a national movement that seeks to ignite generosity and enable collective action by bringing together companies, charities, and individuals. Last year, we saw 269 partners coming on board, with more than 300 digital and physical activations. And in total, $47.7 million in donations were raised on Giving.sg during the campaign period from October to December 2025. But beyond these numbers is something even more important. We are seeing people from all walks of life, and even companies of different sizes and from different industries, all step forward to give and shape a society where care for others is lived out in tangible ways. Second, we activate businesses for good through our Company Good initiative. We believe that businesses can be a powerful force and play an important role in shaping a we-first society. When companies recognize that their purpose goes beyond profits to creating holistic value and impact in society, it changes how they operate, how they treat their employees, and how they engage the community. This year, MVPC marks 10 years of the Company of Good movement. As we reach this momentous milestone, we will rally more companies to rethink their corporate purpose and realign their business practices across 5 impact areas: people, society, governance, environment, and economic. As of today, 720 organizations have been recognized as Company of Good, and more than 3,300 companies are part of our broader network and community. And over 2 cohorts of the Company of Good recognition system in 2024 and 2025, conferred companies have contributed more than $357 million in donations and more than 1 million volunteer hours. Going forward, we will continue to mobilize even more companies to activate their networks to scale positive impact. Third, we strengthen nonprofits. As we work to make giving a part of everyday life, we must also ensure that our giving ecosystem, including our charities and nonprofits, are well-equipped and well-managed to support people to give back in meaningful and impactful ways. From our national giving study, we know that trust in charities is a key predictor of giving. People who donate and volunteer want to know that their contributions are in good hands and will be used in the right places for the right people. To strengthen this trust and accountability, we invest in building stronger leadership and governance in the nonprofit sector through our Center for Nonprofit Leadership, CNPL. Programs such as Board Match help charities recruit board members with the right skills and leadership qualities, while tools like Board Pulse 2.0 enable boards to reflect on their collective performance and work on areas for improvement. Over time, these efforts strengthen the performance and effectiveness of our charities, as well as public trust in the charity sector. At the same time, we recognize that not all giving goes through registered charities. Many Singaporeans want to contribute in more informal, personal, and relational ways. That is why we work with partners to offer alternative pathways for like-minded individuals to give collectively. One example is our Bagus Together initiative. Of course, Bagus is the Malay word for good, but it's also an acronym for Building All Groundnuts for Success Together. And this is a partnership with the Temasek Foundation and the Tote Board to help support ground-ups, which are citizen-led social impact initiatives. And the aim of Bagus Together is to strengthen the ecosystem to help such ground-ups start, sustain, and scale their impact by providing access to shared resources, toolkits, funding opportunities, networks, and more. Another way to engage in collective giving is through giving circles. These are groups of individuals who pool resources and journey alongside a family or support a cause. Unlike the more traditional forms of giving like donating to and volunteering at charities, this model channels funds and other forms of support directly to families to meet identified needs. Giving circles foster shared responsibility, greater autonomy, and personal connections. They transform giving into a meaningful lived experience. Our fourth and newest focus area is nurturing the next generation of givers. Our national giving study also showed that youth volunteerism rose from 23% in 2021 to 31% in 2023. This is, of course, very encouraging, but we can do more. The study also found that people who remember giving their childhood years are more likely to give later on in life. So if we want to build a giving culture that sustains contribution across life stages and generations, we must start young. Our goal is not to just increase participation among today's youth, but to increase positive giving experiences that have a lasting effect and shape how young people contribute to society, even as they progress across different life stages. When people experience the life, the joy and meaning of giving in their formative years, they are more likely to carry on the giving habit with them for life. That is why we are building partnerships with institutes of higher learning, including schools, polytechnics, ITA, and universities. We want to make giving more accessible and engaging and interesting for the youth. This includes introducing micro-giving opportunities that lower barriers to entry, as well as exploring innovative ways to engage the youth, including ground-up initiatives and giving circles that I mentioned earlier, which can be flexible entry points into community action for our youth. The aim is simple: to cultivate giving as a lifelong habit, starting from young. Ultimately, everything we do points towards the big picture. Inclusion, social cohesion, and a we-first society are not abstract ideals. They can be nurtured and strengthened in very practical ways. At MVPC, we strongly believe that volunteerism and philanthropy can play a significant role to catalyze the shift from a me to a we mindset, to build a society where people care not only for themselves and their families, but also for the people around them. A society where there's a strong sense of collective responsibility and compassion is lived out every day and everywhere through acts of kindness and giving. Because a we-first society does not just happen. It needs to be nurtured. This is where our vision of a city of good, where everyone contributes towards building a more caring, inclusive, and compassionate society, is closely aligned with and strongly supports the We First society. So to build a more inclusive and We First society, each and every one of us in this room and outside of this room needs to contribute and play our part. And together, we can nurture the heart of Singapore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. It's very heartening to see the progress that we have made over the years with MPPC's efforts, and especially to see how volunteering is thriving across all levels of our society and across all age groups, from young to not so young and the more experienced. Last but not least, may I invite Minister David Neo to deliver his presentation.
Well, I want to start by thanking everybody in the audience here today. I was told that somehow you all managed to get the SMS of Finance, Jeffrey Xiao, to give MCCY more money for football fields. But please don't stop there. We also need more badminton courts, pickleball courts, table tennis courts, swimming pools as well. But good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, both Vincent and Tony, for sharing your thoughts on We First, many of which I think we'll deeply reflect and see how we can all be part of this movement. So what is a We First society? Since mid-May last year, MCCY has been talking to many different people on this subject, academics, professionals, and community leaders. And we discovered that different people have different takes. Well, that diversity of thought in itself is valuable. Many also ask, who does the we refer to? And then, does we first mean me second? Well, let me share my take on this through a story. So this is the time of the year when we are celebrating the achievements of all our students. And in my constituency of Tampines North, we have a lot of students who do very well. More than 1,000 students. So that means, 2 weekends, and we run these sessions back to back because you don't want too many of them, so they don't have to wait too long. After the presentation, I usually speak to the students to ask them if they were happy, if they felt proud of themselves. And on one afternoon, I spoke to one of my young residents, probably about 10 or 11 years old, and I asked him, do you feel proud of yourself? He said, yes. Did your mom tell you you're proud of you? He said, yes. And I said, are you happy? He said, yes. Then he fidgeted for a little bit, and then I could see he almost sort of summoned up all of his courage, and he said, Minister, can I tell you something? Actually, I'm not very happy. So then I was wondering, is it the food not nice? Certificate name wrong? What was it? He said, when the first few kids went up to receive their awards, everybody clapped really loudly. But then because I was in the middle, right? By the time it's my turn, people are talking among themselves, taking their photograph, I don't know do what. So I asked him, so what did you do about it? He said, I made it a point that after I receive my award, I will stay there and I will continue to clap for all the rest of the students until the last one got it. And he said, you know what? When I did that, I noticed that the people around me did that too. So, well done to him. And then you should ask me, what did I do about that? So I had a few more sessions to run. So the next session, and the ones after that, I told my residents the same story about how my 11-year-old resident felt. And I asked them, could all of you do me a favor and make it a point that we collectively, as a community, cheer for every single last kid until they are done? And that afternoon, we got the loudest cheers ever in that CC. But that is what We First means, by putting others before self, and when you do that, collectively, we are much better people, a much better community. So this simple story illustrates why We First is important and why putting we before me is always better. A society where we care for one another and we help each other to do well is a better society, where we can accommodate one another and live harmoniously, and where individuals feel supported by others and can thrive. A We First society underpins good governance, growth, and prosperity. Because as human beings, we all exist in a social context. And in such a context, Society flourishes when we work together and we seek to advance the interests of we, and thereby creating the best conditions for me. Like my young resident knew, the cheers won't be very loud if everybody just cheered for themselves. It's only when we cheer together for each other that's when we do better. And this is our Singapore story for over 60 years. We built a multicultural Singapore with a national identity that does not replace our individual cultural identities, but builds on top of it. This is possible because each culture and community share a very strong we consensus to foster respect and harmony. And none of our communities push for the maximum interests of the individual communities, because that would be at the expense of others. And this in turn preserves the space for each ethnic community to pursue and to practice our culture and religion. Another example is how we emerged stronger from the COVID-19 pandemic. With a fast-track vaccine, a logical me-first response is, I don't want to get vaccinated because nobody knows whether there will be long-term effects. But thankfully, our society was able to adopt a we-first mentality where the majority of us got vaccinated so we could achieve herd immunity as a nation, open our borders, save lives and livelihoods, and more importantly, our actions protected those of us who could not get vaccinated because of medical reasons. Well, Vincent talked about a trade-off between getting ahead and getting together. Well, I think it may not be so binary. Rather, as the little story I shared illustrates, we get further ahead when we get together. Like how birds fly in formation, fly further and faster because they provide mutual uplift, we achieve greater success together with our collective strength. Well, as Mr. Bhavan thoughtfully observed in the Straits Times commentary last August, building a we-first society is the hardest policy to achieve. Not because we lack resources or legislative tools, but because it demands something deeper. A shift in how we relate to one another. The government will take the first step to provide a blueprint for change, but the movement only happens when each of us, every one of us, through our individual actions, turn these blueprints into reality. One way to build a we-first society is to create opportunities for people to interact. This deepens understanding and appreciation for one another in spite of our differences, and it fosters a certain genuine, authentic connection. Well, there was some good discussion on how this might look like in the morning panels, including a lot of playing of soccer, but we need to build social capital and social cohesion. And I also agree with Tony that we need to start from young, because when we grow up together, we can better identify with one another. For example, we have the MOE OBS Challenge Program, this is the photo you see there, where our secondary three students not just learn to kayak or trek, but they also learn to work together with their watchmates who come from different backgrounds, different schools, and have different life stories. Another way to build a we-first society is for us to work together, government, private sector, citizens, to build our community and nation together. What we are experiencing, and perhaps you have experienced this too, is that meaningful participation creates meaningful connections. And when we contribute to build something, it becomes a part of us. Across Singapore, we are witnessing something encouraging, micro-communities forming their own support networks to uplift those who need an extra hand. So for example, in Yio Chu Kang, what you see here, a dozen residents prepare meals and organize activities for close to 40 seniors every month with food supplied by the local Hawkers Association. And stories like these remind us that community building is about a collection of our individual actions. It starts with people who see a need and they choose to act. We all have the capacity to initiate or support such efforts in our own spheres and in our own ways. It only takes a spark to create a movement. So how might you spark a movement? And how can the government do better to create that spark in you? All these are some of the questions that I encourage us to reflect on and to discuss later. My last thought is that we have to make we first a way of life. This means nurturing a culture of other-centeredness, where we foster the instinct to think of others first and to extend kindness, to be kinder to one another. But how can we nurture this culture? Is it through friendly visual reminders, such as the thoughtful bunch, the cartoon characters that you see in our MRT trains, that encourages courteous behaviors on our commutes? Or through campaigns to encourage residents to give way and to show patience in shared spaces, such as at hawker centers or on the roads? Or perhaps you may have entirely different approaches that you might want to suggest. And I invite all of us to share our ideas and insights on how we can collectively nurture this culture of mutual care and consideration. To conclude, most people think of Singapore's story over the past 60 years as the economic miracle that we are. But the other aspect of our success and what makes us exceptional was our ability to build a cohesive nation through our diversity, regardless of race, language, or religion. And for us to continue to stay exceptional in this changed world, we need to work together to nurture a we-first society, one where we build bridges and not walls, one where we band together as a chorus and not just individual voices, one where we bring everyone along as one united people. In this way, we can then say that we are truly embodying the essence of our pledge, we, the citizens of Singapore. Because as my young resident intrinsically knew, we are better when we work together, and we work better together when we put we first. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Minister David, for sharing your insights and for the reminder to us that the government is not the main character and not even the prime mover in a we first society. Now, before we open up the floor, the question and answer session to the floor, I'm going to exercise my privilege as moderator to pose a couple of questions to our panelists and to get them to debate a little bit on this topic before we open it up. So I'm going to go back to this point on the tension between getting ahead and getting along and competition versus community. Prof. Vincent, we'll start with you first since you brought up this point. Earlier we heard that social capital fluctuates with the macroeconomic environment. So when economic conditions are challenging, competition or the sense of competition is heightened, and it hurts social capital because people may feel that resources are scarce, and they would tend to focus more inward on individual priorities rather than the collective good. In social psychology, we describe this as a zero-sum mentality. So when people have a strong sense of zero-sum mentality, they see resources as being limited. If someone else has more, there will be less for me. So social cohesion is compromised. Now suppose the economic pie were larger, or if people were effectively reassured that there's enough for everyone, even if times are bad, would the trade-off between competition and community be less stark? And I would throw in a second question. So to what extent would economic transfers, such as GST vouchers and CDC vouchers, have an impact, especially in times of economic difficulty? And then I'll get the rest of the panelists to respond as well. Yeah, Vincent.
You said enough for everyone. That's a very big if. If you can in fact secure the futures of everybody. Okay, if let's say I said, okay, I'm going to secure your future for you. I'm going to give you, say, $10 million, right? You don't have to worry anymore about the future, and even your children and so on is settled, right? But the caveat is this, I'm going to give all your neighbors around you 15 million. Will you be happy? You should be happy because you don't have any more financial challenges, right, with the 10 million and so on. But people will say, hey, why did that person get more? So I think it's not so easy. Of course, it helps to assure and to say, I'm going to take care of your future. But people compete and then compare. Right, so I think competition and comparison dovetail. they go together. I think the real policy question for me is how do you get people not to compare? Then the notion of a we society begins to gain more traction or becomes more possible. I don't know the answer. How do you get people not to compare? Because, okay, is public housing good enough? It is. We have a fantastic public housing system. But people still want to buy private, right? Why is that? Because they want status. So people are driven by needs. People are also driven by the desire for status. So how do you get people not to compare? I think that's the issue with a we first society, that if somebody has more than me, I'm not going to, that's not going to arouse something in me. But at the same time, if you don't compare, you won't compete. You know?
Okay.
So
it's back to the issue of inequality that you mentioned earlier, right? A little bit of that.
Yeah, and then you will say, okay, learn to compare yourself with yourself, right? But according to whose standard? You see? So competition and comparison go hand in hand, they dovetail, they go together. And I think the sort of politics of envy or so that comes about as a result of competition and comparison after that makes it very difficult to see one another as we. So on the national pledge, right, we have regardless of race, language, or religion, but we don't have regardless of class. Right? We don't have regardless of socio-economic background.
Right.
Right. So I don't know how. I don't know how to not compare. Yeah. It's part of the human condition.
Right.
And when you say don't compare, what do you really mean? Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Vincent. I'm going to move on to Minister David and then to Tony as well. So, Minister David, you mentioned that you feel it's not so binary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe could you expand a little bit of that, and also maybe comment on what Vincent mentioned about, this tendency for this social comparison. Yeah.
Well, I think it's not binary simply because I think, like I illustrated, through a simple story. But a lot of times we are better when we are together. The saying goes, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. And I think a lot of it, yes, people will compare and so on, but I think the question is, how do you set the question? And how do you set the frame? If the question is one of, do you want more competition or do you want more cohesion, then it's a zero-sum question. But if the question is one where we ask everybody, how do we become more cohesive and more competitive together, you get different answers and different results. When it comes to comparison, I'm a bit more optimistic than Vincent because, the good thing about this portfolio, it keeps you young. You talk to a lot of young people, right? And, surveys and whatnot. And the reality is that our young people, I think it's something like at least 60% of them feel that what is more important in life is meaning and purpose. Not about how big a house you stay or how fast your car is. It's about meaning and purpose. And if we can frame the question to one of a comparison about how meaningful and purposeful is your life, now I think we generate a very different kind of conversations. And I think I personally am quite optimistic about our ability to shape and nurture a we first society.
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe Tony, your NPPC has done a lot of work with youth as well. A lot of the surveys that you have done have shown that that volunteerism is well and alive and very high among the youth. So, what are your thoughts on this? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think I want to pick up on Minister's point because I think studies are showing that the millennials and Gen Zs actually have a much greater sense of their meaning and purpose. And I can give you examples because in the work that I do, we do see young people, late 20s, 30s, who actually have done well. They have done well in school, they have gone to graduate school, they went to the top schools. Maybe they started in a corporate, they started in a professional services firm. Nothing wrong with all that, but they reach a point where actually they feel like they don't want to be in that rat race. They feel like for them, meaning and purpose in life, being able to do work that matters to the community, that I can help others get better, the we idea, is important to them. I don't think it applies to everyone. There are still many who feel that that's important and that's okay. But increasingly, we are seeing people, young people, I think the social service sector and the charity sectors, that choose. They have choices, but they choose not to go for that competition. They choose to believe that their life, the time that they spend at the workplace is better off where they can serve people, they help uplift individuals and strengthen communities. So I think for us, it is very encouraging, but for me, it is not just a certain percentage, and therefore the next generation of giver strategy is actually widening that pool. And I think the point about competition versus compassion and so forth is really how do we give them meaningful experiences at an early age where that sense of empathy and compassion can really be cultivated and nurtured. And so that's really the thing. If we have that element of saying you have to go and do this, pick litter and all that, and they don't understand why they're doing it, I think it's going to be challenging when you encourage them to contribute and volunteer when they become adults. But where we can give them meaningful experiences, and there's so many examples, like the two quotes that I shared earlier. People have gone through certain formative experiences. I think they grow into their adult years very differently. And I think that's one of the things that we need to recognize, that even as Singapore reaches a certain level of per capita GDP and so forth, it cannot be the same level of increase in the next 60 years compared to the last 60 years. And therefore, the measures of success, what defines success, what do you want to go for? Is it always going to be the upgrading? If everyone keeps upgrading from HDB, everyone will be living in private property, right? So that's the logical conclusion if you extend it all the way. But is that possible? Is that the way to go? And is that even meaningful for current and future generations of Singaporeans?
Okay, so a more sustainable and meaningful model of success, basically.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay, right. So I would like to open the session to the floor. Just a few quick reminders. There are mics at either side of the room, so if you want to ask a question, please feel free to go up there. And remember to state your name, the organization you represent, and please keep your questions short so that more people can ask questions. I see a question over there. Yeah, the young gentleman. Yeah.
Hello. Hi everybody, I'm Branson Kwok from Government High School. Before I begin, I just wanted to say thank you to the panelists for the immense insights. They are probably more insightful than what I would have learned in school today.
Good excuse to skip school, yeah.
I think to provide some context for my question, it's more of a follow-up to Mr. So's answer just now. I think from a youth or student perspective, the volunteering culture, it originates from extrinsic motivations. So I can see many of my batchmates doing volunteering just because they want to accumulate the VIA hours or because it looks good on their portfolio. I mean, as cynical as it sounds, it's reality. And I mean, it detracts from the core purpose of the We First society by transactionalizing volunteering for personal benefits. So I think my question is, how do we mitigate this and make the volunteering experience more genuine and more meaningful for students to really cultivate that innate spirit of giving in our students? Thank you.
Okay, Tony, you want to take that?
Thank you very much for that question. I was recently asked that similar question about intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, and whether you should just feel like you always want to have that sense of altruism and values that drive volunteerism. I think my view is we should not be too purist about it, because not everyone intrinsically wants to do good and wants to volunteer. But within the school system, in values in action and so forth, even in companies, in certain groups, it is of value to be able to start something that introduces people to giving. But the experience has to be meaningful. The experience has to be impactful. The experience has to allow people to interact and see the value of their work in changing lives and something that makes a difference in society. And when that happens, the extrinsic hopefully actually evolves and morphs into something more intrinsic. And from the broader perspective, actually, for long-term sustained, pervasive and impactful volunteerism that's a culture, I think we need to eventually get people to connect with their intrinsic motivation. Because as you pointed out, if it's about extrinsic motivation to check off some points or get some credits, when those motivations are no longer there, they stop volunteering, right? Things stop. So I think it's not wrong to have some of that as a way to motivate, encourage people, even to feel happy, feel good. The idea of a helper's high, much like the runner's high. You feel good about giving donations or volunteering. And there's nothing wrong to have tax deduction, okay, for your donations. So hope that we can continue with that tax deductions. But certainly, the idea that that's all good, but I think people want to feel like when I do something of that, it makes a difference. And that's why the notion of trust, I talked about charities being well-governed, well-led, and creating trust. I think we want to avoid a situation where people do something and it ends up going to a place where the resources are misused or misplaced. So intrinsic motivation, very important, but not everyone has it. But I think we want to nudge them forward if we can provide some structure, some initial incentives. But once they get started, for a giving culture to take root in Singapore, we need people to have that intrinsic motivation. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Do the other panelists want to respond as well?
Oh, Benson, my other job is in education as well. No, but the point is really like Tony has said, what is the spark that it takes to spark a movement, right? What is the spark that it takes for you or for our students to understand and to appreciate and to really value this thing about being out there and making a difference and helping people? Sometimes that spark is, yes, through your VIA points to want to get out there and do something, but it's really about providing opportunities, but over time to develop and nurture that love. And this is also where I think it's important for all our volunteer organizations out there to also take the time to nurture and to build that love for serving in our volunteers. It cannot be a transaction where, oh great, I got all these kids from MOE, they need their VIA points, they come, they do a bunch of stuff for me, off you go. I don't think that's the kind of relationship that we're talking about if we want to talk about nurturing a we first society. But, it's got to be really, like I said, that deeper shift in how we relate to one another, okay? How we see each other, how we understand each other, and how we build on one another to cultivate this kind of society that we want.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. I realize I didn't answer your GST question.
Okay.
I think the GST and the vouchers are very, very helpful for especially low SES families where every dollar counts in daily life and so on. But I think even the MPs and so on are talking about this wealth inequality as the next, sort of material inequality to tackle, right? I think wealth inequality, we have progressive taxes and so on, but I think there's more in the area of wealth inequality that we might perhaps want to think about going ahead into the future. I don't discount all the ground efforts and volunteering, mentoring, and so on, very, very important, social workers and so on. But I think as a sociologist, I want to draw attention to the macro level factors and talking about things like inflation and inequality does affect how people relate to one another. I mean, you talk about spillover effects at work and so on. If work is stressful, if I find it difficult to make ends meet and so on, it affects the family, affects relationships, it affects how I relate to people and so on. So in addition to the ground, very good-hearted efforts, very, very important, would also be the macro level factors. I think especially the level of government would be, these are very critical levers at the structural level that only governments can shift. So immigration, inequality, and inflation would be important for social cohesion.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Is there someone else here? Yes, I see someone on the floor there. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Minister David Neo regarding the Singaporeans at the bottom 20%, the B20. we embraced social democracy in 1965 when PAP started. And one pivot of the social democracy is the idea of the welfare state, state welfareism, a lot of social investment by the state. But come 1980s, spoilers came, you know, Reaganomics and Thatcherism spoke about this idea of liberal free market, where there's very minimal state interference, state participation. Market will decide everything, even welfare services, even social services. And I think because of that, we see the impact of, and sadly, welfareism, state welfareism became a dirty word in Singapore. I remember in 1980s, because I was involved in community development, and we will always say that this is not a word, welfareism, state welfareism. So, Minister, seeing the situation today, are you prepared? Is the government prepared? Is the state prepared to relook at how we do our social democracy and to devulgarize the word welfareism, state welfareism, and do more, to help the bottom 20? The way towards an equal society is unequal opportunities. You have 4 children, Minister, 3 children brilliant, 1 child not doing well. You will put a lot of resources on that 1 child, giving a lot of opportunities. Why can't we see Singapore as a family? Bottom 20% are our kids. We need to give them more opportunities. Welfareism have to come back. We got to devulgarize the word welfareism or state welfareism and embrace the kind of social democracy which Reaganomics and Thatcherism has in fact spoiled it. Can I have your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Lamy.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for that question. I think I'll start off by saying I was B20. I was B20, right? When I was born, I was B20. I think I managed to... I'm quite clear that if I were not born in Singapore, I was born in a different country, I'm not sure I would be sitting here today, right? So I think the first point is that the government is always looking at how to uplift our people, right? I don't think we change positions from time to time, but we are always looking at how to uplift our people because social mobility is important. Social mobility is important to us. I think that is what keeps us united as a country, as a people. The fact that really, regardless of race, language, or religion, or background, you can have a fair shot in life over here. I think we are always doing all kinds of things, but I think what is equally important is that, like in my whole life growing up, being given opportunities, given support by the state, I've never for once felt like it was welfare or that it was given to me. I always felt like I had to work for it. The opportunities were there, but I had to work for it. And because I had to work for it, I think it cultivated a certain kind of ethic. And I think what's more important is this thing that I think Vincent mentioned. I had dignity. And I think that's the way it has to be done. I don't think you want to dish out welfare. I don't think people who are B20 want to feel like they're B20. But I think what we want to create is, like you said, create a field of opportunities where all our kids, and even more so, those who are perhaps underprivileged, will be able to grasp the opportunities if they want to, and create in them the sense that they have earned it. And I think that's what helps uplift them more than just providing them with support. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe we'll take 2 questions. Questions over there. 1 question there. Yeah.
I'm Edwin Lau, representing Victoria Junior College. I wanted to ask, how might we encourage people of minoritized populations to volunteer more as well? Because usually when we conceptualize giving, we say we give to people who are less fortunate. But then less fortunate is a very big category. How might we also encourage those people within such categories to volunteer or to give as well? Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe I'll take that.
Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting because what we've discovered is actually that there isn't like one group of people who give exclusively and another group that receive exclusively. Actually, the whole giving process has both a give and a receive dimension. And so I don't think it's a binary thing where people give and others receive, and it's by socioeconomic status and so forth. Because I think even, as I described, the different ways to give actually provides access to everyone. And it's not just like only very rich people who says, I've made my millions and I can give. Giving.sg, the way that it's set up, actually encourages people who want to set aside even, say, $5 a month, which is what we did for SG60, $5 a month for a year, which is $60. And that level, actually, it opens up giving to many different groups of people. So at the same time, this notion about being able to support and help communities, actually the givers also receive. The givers also feel encouraged. The givers also feel supported. And like the two examples I cited, again, people who have been able to go through life, maybe in a certain B20, actually, as they progress, they actually give back. So I think we should see it as many different dimensions and configuration. It's not strictly just a certain power dynamic or economic dynamic that is at play in giving. And that's why we really want to talk about everyone can give everywhere and every day. If you don't have money, you have time. If you have skills, you have other things that you can do, you can contribute. And those of us who receive, sometimes we actually want to also give because there's a dignity in being able to also say, whatever it is that I have, I want to give. I'll just give you one example. I know of a person with special needs who've got a lot of support and help. And he's got so many friends who support him. And then one day he came up to us, and this is a religious situation. He says, I want to volunteer. I want to help be a host. And I think we have to set it up for him, but he wants to help because he's appreciated the help. Now he also wants to contribute. So I think we want to see it as a society, as a we-first society, where it's not just about one direction. It actually should be bi-directional and multi-directional.
Thank you so much, Tony.
If I can just add on to that. So this one, Vincent was correct because my thing is not backed by data. I didn't check the data, but it's just a lot of anecdotal observations, both from my previous days in Silver Generation Office and now, is that, Benson spoke earlier about intrinsic motivation. Actually, my encounters are that it's more likely for somebody who has received help to want to help others for those reasons that Tony mentioned. Because it's you see how somebody made a difference in your life. You felt it, you appreciate it, and therefore you want to give back to others. Okay? So the things Edwin, the things you spoke about, the rich people giving all that is the government doing its work. The government telling all the rich people, hey, can you all also go and help other people? Don't just be rich, right? So that's more like a narrative. And like we said earlier, it should be a case whereby it really doesn't matter how the desire to give back is sparked. We want the motivations thereafter to be correct. Yeah.
Actually, I think research does corroborate with that as well. That a lot of people who go into a social service sector, social work, is because when they say, when I was young, someone actually helped me, and they don't worry about the low pay and all that. They think that it's a meaningful job, I want to do that. Yeah, so there's actually research that backs that.
Okay.
Yeah, before I go to the floor, I'm just going to quickly run a couple of questions from Pigeonhole. It seems like we spoke earlier about how it's very difficult to shrug off this innate sort of a tendency to want to compete and compare, and there are multiple questions from Pigeonhole that actually talk about this as well. One of the most upvoted questions was about how I think it's very easy to go on about we first if there are gains to everyone, but I think there are times where we still have to lean into we first even if individuals have to sacrifice their own or their children's advancement. How about, for example, not buying into education rat race, even if I have the resources? How do we dovetail this with meritocracy? And then there's another question with 10 upvotes about how we first make sense when helping the poor and needy, but how do we apply this mindset in competitive situations like job promotions, school admissions, or business deals when someone has to win and someone has to lose? So maybe I could invite the panelists to sort of think about how do we mitigate this sort of this fear of losing out. Yeah. Like I want to do this, but if no one else is doing this, I'm the only one doing this, then I'm going to be the last one.
Maybe let me say something about meritocracy. I think we need to make the distinction between early meritocracy, meritocracy 1.0. Early meritocracy helps to lift up, society. But advanced meritocracy, which is meritocracy 2.0, becomes increasingly then a way to reproduce the advantages of the earlier winners of the game. And ironically, then meritocracy becomes the very engine for the reproduction of inequality. Of course, meritocracy will always help because there will always be people who need a helping hand. And you need, for example, schooling to give people an avenue. But it increasingly is the case that as meritocracy advances and becomes more mature, that meritocracy ends up reproducing the structures that meritocracy 1.0 had created in the first place.
So we can't keep using the same formula?
Yeah, we have to keep meritocracy but somehow adapt it to the current conditions. I know we have been talking about compassionate meritocracy and so on. These are variations of that basic principle of meritocracy. But just want to put it out there that the same logics of meritocracy applied to different generations, applied to the 60s as opposed to applied today, would yield different results, even though the mechanism is the same. Yeah.
Right. Yes, Tony.
If I may just add in a few points. I think in terms of competition, I suppose we all know that there's healthy competition as well, because that helps to spur each other on. In sports, in studies and so forth, the competition can be helpful because you help each other to get better. But the question is how to avoid it becoming unhealthy. How to avoid it becoming something that's the end-all and be-all. And perhaps there's this notion of, again, how do we define success? Is it an individual win or is it a team win? And I think the way that perhaps the systems is set up in schools, in sports and so forth, where do you think that life is an individual sport or a team sport? And if life is a team sport, then how do we help the team win? How do we help my community? How do we help Singapore win? So that I can also enjoy the fruits of that. But I think that's other thing is that this notion of definition of merit perhaps is where merit is as a way of social sorting has become very narrow in terms of academic performance. If we can first widen it so that different people with different talents can be appreciated and recognized, and perhaps even doing good can be something that is appreciated and recognized, just like academic merit, just like business success, I think it can be helpful because then a society becomes more balanced. The society doesn't just focus on the 5 C's, but maybe a different kind of 5 C's that have to do with care and compassion and contribution. So I think that there are different ways to think about competition that is competition for good.
Thank you, Tony. Minister, would you like to respond?
Oh, I agree with what was said. I think for meritocracy, it's a way to achieve the larger thing that we want to have, which is about social mobility, making sure everybody has a fair chance in this place, regardless of race, language, religion, background. And it is a very natural human instinct to want to entrench a position in life. And whatever the games of meritocracy are, you will try to apply whatever resources you have to make sure your kids and your grandkids have a better chance. That's human. So the whole thing has to be constantly looked at, like Vincent said. We have to constantly look at it, constantly review it, so that no matter what, in Singapore, you have the best chance in life. And it's something that we got to keep working on. Then I think on the other thing about how do we deal with this thing about the fear fear of losing out. It's an interesting thing. I think we all said, all three of us said this thing about, we have to define for ourselves what success means, right? Be the change that you want to see. I remember speaking to some of our youths at one of the interaction sessions, and then we were talking about the same thing. They were talking about meaning and purpose, and I was telling them, yes, you should go try difficult things and all that. Then they told me, Minister, I totally agree with you, but can you tell my parents that? I think my parents need a class. So sometimes it's about how we are as a society, because really who we are as a society is a collective of who we believe and what we believe as a people. And if we truly, seriously believe that we ought to be a kinder, more inclusive, and a better society, one that doesn't just focus on pure hard metrics of economics or PSLE scores. By the way, I am quite sure that if we just took PSLE scores, I won't be sitting here also, right? But if we are a people who wants to really build that kind of we first society we talk about, where the intangibles matter, where meaning and purpose matter, then we got to redefine it. And for the parents here, you also, I'm a parent too, we got to also give our children a chance to redefine success on their terms. Difficult as it may be, uncomfortable as it may be, but we got to let every generation make its own decisions, and we got to let every generation define for themselves what success means.
Thank you, Minister. We have just a couple of minutes for one last question. I'm sorry. Yeah, one more question.
Hi, I'm Sean from NUS, an undergraduate. I think from a youth perspective, many of us resonate with our priorities being more of meaning rather than academic status, so on and so forth. I would like to ask the panel if you would be able to share any real-life examples or spark points of institutional design on how we can implement and operationalize this we-first sort of mindset, because I think it can be quite abstract, for some of us. Thank you.
Okay, would anyone like to volunteer to?
Well, I can go. So I think a lot of the we-first mindset, it's about letting citizens take the lead, right? Supporting them, nurturing them to take some of these actions. So one of the things that the National Youth Council does is that we give out a Changemaker grant, right? So for our young people who kind of feel like, I want to do a project that makes a difference, okay, for my community, you can apply for this grant, and it will support you with resources. You take the lead, and then you organize a group of people, and you go make a difference, right? But that's one of those examples. I think the other thing we try to do is, for example, through the SG Partnerships Office, where we have different organizations. I think one of them was this company that wanted to do some good, right? AI and all that. They didn't know where to go. So they went to SGPO, and then we put them in touch with community organizations, and then I think they successfully ran more than 2,000 AI workshops, okay, for different ones in the community. But I think those are some of the things that the government can facilitate, right? Providing resources, grants, okay, encouraging people to take the lead, forming partnerships, connecting organizations with people, with communities, to bring the resources, channel them to the right areas where we can make a greater impact and deliver a greater difference.
Okay, thank you. Tony, you have any to add to that?
Yeah, I think in terms of institutional support, it is where it could be the public service, it could be companies, it could be foundations and so forth, where I suppose it is important to recognize what you would incentivize and what you would motivate. Example is this: who do you hire? Do you hire on the basis of academic grades? Do you hire on the basis of just certain types of achievement? Or do you hire from a broader range of different sets of capabilities? I would even say that where is the weightage in terms of community contribution? We've had tremendous stories that come out of the President's Volunteerism and Philanthropy Awards of young Singaporeans at a very young age, from age 10. Amazing that they're doing ground-ups, amazing that they're doing things that actually help support others in the community. And where organizations begin to put more weightage on that in terms of hiring, in terms of giving scholarships, and even your employees, for example, who do a lot of this good work, of course, does not mean that they don't need to work hard and contribute, but where is the extra bit that you say, this is important, I recognize what you're doing in terms of volunteering, in terms of contributing to the community, in terms of helping to uplift certain members of the community. I want to encourage you. I want to recognize you. And that's, I think, how institutions, if they believe in helping to support this We First, I talk about company of good, that companies in this room where you can change a bit of that metric of success within your organization, I think that gives really the substance to being able to encourage young people to take this part seriously.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Well, actually, out of time, but rather than have me summarize what went on during the whole panel, I'm going to pass the buck to the panelists, actually. Before we leave the audience, I'm going to ask you, what is your ideal vision of a We First society for Singapore? What does that look like to you? What would that look like to you? Maybe Vincent, you want to go first?
I would like to see a kinder Singapore. We have a kindness campaign. We have a kindness movement, Dr. William once, many years. But we don't have yet, in my view, a kindness culture.
A kindness culture.
Yeah, we have a kindness campaign, we have a kindness movement. I think the third phase of it would be a kindness culture. But the question that comes to my mind is it at all possible for a competitive culture to coexist with a kindness culture? What culture do we have? I think we have a kiasuism culture. I know the term is no longer in vogue, but at the root of it, the competition is actually a result of the fear of failure and losing out, and so I think we talked about it. And here, actually, I'm very heartened by the Albatross files in being able to reimagine Singapore, because for the first 60 years, we've endorsed somewhat or sort of took on a survivalist sort of mentality, right? Where there was, I think it was suitable for the time. Yeah, but actually the Albatross files suggest to us that to some extent we chose it ourselves and we succeeded. So we can be perhaps kind and confident.
Okay,
right?
thank you.
Yeah, kind and confident. So as opposed to harsh and fearful and kiasu, you see. I don't think kiasuism is a compliment. Yeah, we treat it as satire and so on, but I don't think it's a compliment. It doesn't speak well of us as a nation. So I would like to see a kindness culture evolve from a movement or just a campaign.
Okay, thank you, Vincent. Tony?
Yeah, I spoke earlier about the 3 E's. Everyone can give everywhere and every day. And Minister talked about culture of other-centeredness. And for me, my hope and aspiration is really that if we can think about the 6 million residents in Singapore, and everyone committed themselves to do one act of kindness, one act of giving, or one act of other-centeredness. You think about that, 6 million times 365 is more than 2 billion acts of kindness, consideration, other-centeredness. I think that will be transformative in society. That would bring us much closer to the We First society. So I think it's really a question of what will each individual do to contribute to the society we would like to see.
So one small step a day for
one
everyone.
More step, everyone
a big
doing
step
something.
For the whole country.
It doesn't need grand gestures. We talked about no need grand gestures. But what is it that we can do that makes a difference in someone's life?
Okay.
Just one act per day.
Thank you, Tony. And Minister, you have the
Well,
closing
I got
word.
some good news for Vincent. I was having lunch with the good people like Singapore Kindness Movement the other day, and they told me that they did some research and that a kinder workplace is a more competitive and productive workplace, right? And I think being a small country, it's implicit in our national psyche. We're always paranoid. Started with our own founding, right? Yeah. And like I was saying earlier, it's a function of what questions we ask, how do we frame it, and how do we channel those energies. Yes, we are kiasu, but then even when it comes to being kind, doing good, and doing well, we want to be better than other people, right?
Compare. We need
and that's a way, okay, by asking the right questions, framing the right framework, actually we can get, I believe we can get there. If anybody can be a we first society, Singapore is the one.
Okay, thank you. And with that, may I invite everyone to please give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you so much.